the red dust of a southern road, a cry tears through the heavy October air. It is 1899, in Quitman, Clark County, Mississippi. A wooden house creaks under the heat. Fields stretch out like a motionless sea, and in this rural America, a child has just been born. His name is written in black ink in a simple register: Paul Irvin Gunn. Son of a farmer, of a housewife, discreet core of an obscure family. No one yet knows that this name will cross the Pacific sky like a streak of fire. Childhood unfolds among furrows, dust, and rain. He grows up to the rhythm of the seasons, in this South where time stretches, slow and implacable. According to the census records, they move on to Alabama. The roads smell of damp earth and wood. The nights are filled with crickets and silences. Paul walks in the shadow of adults, listens to conversations about harvests, prices, survival. He attends local public schools, simple buildings planted along the roads, blackboards, worn desks, the smell of chalk. He learns to read, to count, to write his name with firmness. No university awaits him, no great libraries, no white stone campuses. The world for him at first seems limited to these southern plains, these scattered farms, these modest towns. But above his head the clouds pass. They trace invisible routes, and somewhere, before he can yet name it, the sky calls to him. The years move on, slow on the ground, fast in his heart. America enters the turmoil of the 20th century. The rumor of a distant war in Europe spreads. Newspapers open onto foreign names, maps covered in trenches and broken lines. Suddenly, the world seems larger, more dangerous, more burning. So the young man from the South turns his back on the fields. He heads toward the sea and the star-spangled flag. He enlists in the U.S. Navy. The registers list him as a sailor. The docks smell of salt, hot tar, wet rope. The deck of the ships echoes under boots. His horizons change color. The deep blue of the ocean replaces the brown of plowed earth. The First World War is already tearing Europe apart. America joins the fight. Millions of men take to the sea. As for what Paul Gunn does then, the archives remain stingy. They state his status as sailor, say nothing of possible combat. But his time at sea is enough to transform his outlook. He feels the power of the machine, the wind of great departures, nights spent contemplating an endless sky, crossed by stars that nothing conceals. It is in this Navy, in this institution that teaches men to obey, to survive, that something cracks and is revealed. A new force is born within the armed forces: aviation. Fragile shapes of wood and fabric begin to land on the ocean, to take off from improvised decks. The first naval aviators rise above the waves. Danger attracts. The sky calls more and more loudly. Paul Gunn takes the leap. He leaves the wet deck for the cramped cockpits. The Navy trains him as an aviator. He becomes a naval aviator. There, under the roar of radial engines, he discovers his true homeland. The depth of the sky, the vibration of the wing in the air, the line of the horizon finally overtaken. He learns navigation, rigor, the iron discipline of military flights. He listens to the roar of the engine as a new heart beating in the fuselage. The 1920s unroll their procession of technical revolutions. The World War has fallen silent, but airplanes keep getting better, climbing higher, going farther. In the American naval aviation, where he serves, missions follow one another, without any precise story being fixed for posterity. It does not matter. The essential thing lies in the bond that is sealed, irrevocable. Paul Gunn now belongs to the air. Then comes the separation. Before the Second World War, he leaves the Navy. Demobilization. Departure from active service. The uniforms stay in closets. Another life begins. But how can one leave what one has become? How can one renounce a sky one has already conquered so many times? The point is not to give up flying. It is to reinvent it. The interwar years open other routes. The map of the world spreads out on the tables of civilian companies. Air routes are drawn over oceans, over jungles, linking cities that until then had been separated by weeks at sea. Thus, Paul Gunn's fate tips toward Asia. He settles in the Philippines. Vast archipelago, then an American territory. The waters there are warm and deep, the islands countless like stars fallen into the sea. Manila hums, a crossroads of ships, voices, mingled tongues. There, in this tropical humidity, Paul finds not only work, but a home. He becomes a civilian pilot. He flies for local transport companies, Philippine Airlines or Philippine Air Taxi Company, depending on whether one follows memoirs or archives, which diverge on the names but not on the role. He is an airline pilot, an airbridge man. Day after day, he traces precise, repetitive paths in the sky, which end up inhabiting his memory like a map branded in red-hot iron. He gets married. His wife's name is Clara, but the sources also show her under the nickname Polly. Together, they settle their family in the Philippines. The children are born, 4 according to the biographies. The days are organized around departures and returns. Little feet run across the floors. In the evening, the light in Manila takes on tones of gold and blood over the bay. While the house hums with children's laughter, the man watches the sky. He takes off from Manila, heads toward other points in the archipelago, Cebu, Davao, Iloilo, and so many other names engraved on approach charts. Often, he pushes farther, Borneo, Singapore. The clouds of Southeast Asia, heavy as mountains, greet him every day. The monsoons lash the wings. The storms rip open the horizon. By passing through again and again, he memorizes everything. The airfields, from major developed runways to rough strips lost in the vegetation. The air routes, the safe corridors, the treacherous zones. The winds that shift without warning. The mists that rise from the jungle. The ports, the depots, the airfields of the Philippines, Netherlands East Indies, New Guinea region. Every landform becomes a landmark, every islet a beacon. Without realizing it, he forges the weapon that will make him a key pawn in a war that has not yet begun. While he flies, the world darkens. At the other end of Asia, the Japanese armies are on the move. In 1931, Manchuria falls under their control. In 1937, the Sino-Japanese War sets China ablaze. The newspapers, even in Manila, speak of cities in flames, of rivers of refugees. Japanese expansion advances step by step through East and Southeast Asia. The Philippines, an American territory, suddenly become a strategic issue, a key piece on the Pacific chessboard. Washington knows that the archipelago is a key to the sea routes, a gateway to Asia. So the American Army strengthens its presence. The United States Army Forces in the Far East, USAFFE, establishes itself in the archipelago. From July 1941, a prestigious name takes command, General Douglas MacArthur. The man becomes the face of the defense of the Philippines. The air grows heavy with threat. In 1941, the American air presence swells. The Far East Air Force deploys its aircraft on the bases of the archipelago. B-17 bombers rest on the runways of Clark Field. P-40 fighters line up at Nichols Field. Other fields open, other squadrons arrive, exhausted from the crossing, but ready to defend the sky. And in this theater about to erupt, Paul Gunn continues to fly as a civilian. He has not yet been mobilized. No assignment in the U.S. Army Air Forces appears under his name before December 1941. Yet his daily routes often take him to nearby bases, neighboring military airfields. He knows the officers, the mechanics, the young pilots getting used to the harsh light of Luzon. They sometimes talk at the foot of an airplane, trade stories, cigarettes, impressions of rising tensions. On December 7, 1941, at Hawaiian dawn, the sky is torn apart. Pearl Harbor is struck. Japanese bombs rain down on the lined-up battleships. Planes explode on the runways. America enters the war in a single day of fire. In the Philippines, people experience this shock on December 8th, local time. The wave reaches Manila Bay and the Clark and Iba bases like a thunderclap from the far side of the ocean. That morning, the alarms howl. Over Luzon, Japanese formations appear. Bombs fall on American airfields. Clark Field turns into a furnace. B-17s burn on the spot. Iba Field is ravaged. The losses of the Far East Air Force are heavy, brutal, almost unreal. The pilots run, powerless, toward aircraft already doomed by surprise and enemy superiority. The Philippine campaign begins, savage, inexorable. From December 1941 to May 1942, Japanese forces advance on Luzon. American and Filipino troops fall back, step by step. Bataan becomes a word for desperate resistance. Corregidor, the fortress island at the entrance to the bay, prepares for encirclement. In the midst of this oncoming disaster, a family lives in the shadow of catastrophe. The biographies agree. Paul I. Gunn is in the Philippines at the time of the attack, with his wife and children. Nothing establishes the exact place where they are on that day. Manila, another city in the archipelago, a house near an airfield? The detail is lost. What matters is the tightening vice. Enemy planes crisscross the sky he knows better than anyone. Sea routes are closing. Ports are under threat. Gunn's home suddenly finds itself in the zone Japan wants to subdue. Faced with chaos, the American military no longer has the luxury of distinguishing between civilians and soldiers in the air. Civilian planes, the skills of airline pilots, everything becomes a resource. Everything becomes a weapon. The authorities requisition or use these aircraft. Among these men of the sky, Paul Gunn stands out. He's called in. They know what he knows. They need him. Civilians leave behind the codes of peace. Transport planes become tools of survival. Under military control, the missions change in nature. Anonymous passengers are no longer being flown to tourist islands. Key personnel, entire families, crates of documents, essential parts, are being evacuated to areas still free. The Dutch East Indies, Australia. They skirt Japanese patrols, skim the waves, cross regions where the slightest delay can mean capture or death. In this turmoil, Paul Gunn puts to use what his years of civil aviation have given him, an almost intimate knowledge of the archipelago's routes, hidden airstrips, weather corridors between the Philippines, Borneo, Java, New Guinea, Australia. He becomes a guide in a sky that is closing, a scout for exits others cannot see. Officers, mechanics, intelligence personnel escape the coming inferno thanks to these flights. Among them, probably, terrified civilians, weeping families, silent figures clutching pitiful suitcases. Days pass, each mission clawing back a bit more luck from fate. Civilian planes, swept up in this aerial exodus, often take off on the verge of mechanical failure, loaded to the limit. Pilots fly without rest, tracing a fragile bridge southward in the sky. Little by little, the archipelago falls. Bataan surrenders. Corregidor, in turn, yields under fire. American and Filipino flags vanish from the heights, replaced by the Japanese rising sun. Those who could not escape enter the long night of occupation. But some have managed to slip out of the trap. Among them are men who, from Australia, will build the counterstrike. And among these men, we find the trace of Paul I. Gunn. Historical accounts of the USAAF in the Pacific mention his role in the evacuation to Australia. His name appears as that of a valuable pilot, a craftsman of this aerial retreat. The waters that separate the Philippines from Australia then become more than a geographic space, a river of destiny. Over these waves, in this sky, Paul Gunn tears lives from the enemy. With each flight, he leaves behind an archipelago that is sinking. Ahead, a continental landmass looms, Australia, the future bastion of the counteroffensive. This is not yet the time of glory. It is the time of flight, of crumpled maps, of hurried refuelings, of engines begged to hold out a little longer. It is also the time when the fate of this man of the South, this sailor turned aviator, this civilian pilot at the other end of the world, becomes definitively bound to a war that will set the whole Pacific ablaze.